Unit 2. Listening Part 1. Extract 1.
It's actually a remarkable book, Colin, and particularly because, unlike other travel writers, you've managed to get behind the scenes, talk to ordinary Mongolians in their own language and on their own terms. How, in fact, did you go about learning Khalkha? Did you go to classes?
Not exactly. I'd done that for Russian and Chinese, both of which I now speak fluently. But for Khalkha, well, I thought I should pick it up while I was there. You know, learn it on my own and in my own way. So as soon as I arrived, I settled into a flat and immersed myself in the neighbourhood and just started talking to people and getting to know them.
And now you speak it fluently?
Well, I reckon I can more or less hold my own in a conversation.
And what do you think is the key to good language learning? Do you have to be naturally gifted?
Well, obviously, for an adult, it helps to have some sort of gift, and that's not something we've all got. Being fairly outgoing and uninhibited helps too. I mean, you won't get very far if you're scared of making a fool of yourself. But basically, it's application. It's really getting down to it, whatever the circumstances, and getting stuck into it, because, you know, any language you learn is going to be more complicated than maths, and you don't learn maths just by being uninhibited.
Eventually, while you were there, you had the amazing experience of being invited to live with a Mongolian family, didn't you? Tell us a little bit about.
Extract 2.
I remember the trauma as a small child.
Come off it, don't exaggerate. Trauma?
I'm not. Let me finish. The trauma of learning how to spell. You know, they used to give us dictations in class to make sure we knew things like putting a double P in approve and spelling right with GHT. It's frankly absurd.
But it's part of the character and beauty of the language. Not everything has to be reduced to something functional.
Well, maybe not. But as a language teacher, it would make my life a lot easier.
I wonder if that's true. After all, it's not you, but your students that get into trouble with bad spelling. Anyway, nowadays with spell checkers, that's hardly their biggest handicap.
But they just don't know how to say new words correctly.
Then perhaps it's your teaching methods that need reforming.
You've really got it in for me today, haven't you? Anyway, I got to thinking about all this some time ago, when I came across something in a magazine, quite by chance. One thing it mentioned was that spelling reform would cut the space it takes to write something by about 15%. Imagine newspapers, libraries and bookshops with 15% more room.
And think about having to reprint every book and replace every road sign. I think you're being unrealistic, quite honestly. Mind you, I've read a lot about dyslexia amongst English kids, and apparently our complicated spelling system is a major factor there.
If you can call it a system.
So you might have something there.
Extract 3.
Doing a job interview in English is becoming a common experience for many people from overseas, Peggy. But what can they do to avoid coming a cropper?
Well, Simon, the problem is that the candidate often lacks the sort of cultural background that would stand them in good stead in these situations, with the result that while their English is up to scratch, their responses take the interviewer by surprise. You know, a question like, what do you most enjoy about your present job? Where the interviewer is expecting something about the challenge or working with friendly colleagues or such like, and the interviewee is completely thrown because in some cultures people don't necessarily equate work with pleasure at all.
It's more for making ends meet.
Exactly. And at the same time, because they're nervous, they may be less expressive than normal anyway, and this may also show up in their gestures and so on as well. In fact, for many jobs, especially jobs where language skills are not absolutely essential, interviewing isn't necessarily the best way of selecting the right employee anyway. And this goes for native speakers just as much as for people from overseas. A better approach might be to set up a simulation of the job in question, so as to see whether the candidate has the skills and attitude they're looking for. Anyway, Interviewers need to realise that they can't always expect people who've recently arrived from abroad to deal with interviews in a way that they, the interviewers, would find natural.
So the fault is often more with the interviewer, not the interviewee.
Yes.